Good morning. Good morning. We're getting set up. We are streaming live on YouTube, so please note that recording notice, and we'll get started promptly right at 10 a.m. We'll give everybody a chance to jump on as we dive into this awesome, exciting topic, one of my favorite for sure. So we'll get started right at 10. Thank you for hopping on. We're about to get started. We'll give everybody a minute to grab their coffee, get their notes ready. We're sure to have an exciting webinar. So as we kind of warm up and get ready to get started, our webinars are typically 30 to 45 minutes. Quick bite size takeaways is what we strive for, to be mindful of your time, to keep it efficient, but also to keep in line with the management cues feel, of making sure that what we offer is easy to retain and easy to get your Monday started. All right. Well, with that said, we're almost at the top of the hour. So I'll go ahead and start to get us kicked off here. So today we're going to be speaking about designing effective team building activities. And such a simple thing it seems like, but anytime we are working with people and teams, there's a dynamic component of who we are and everything that we bring to the table that adds a bit of complexity to it. So from my experience, it's recognizing and making distinctions along the way in management, that really allows us, not only to partner more effectively with HR, but to get what we intend to get out of each interaction with our people, right? That's kind of the premise of it all. So as we move along, feel free to jump in, feel free to raise your hand, use your emojis, message me in chat if there's something you'd like to share, or there's something that you're reminded of as we go through these key areas of design, which is really the emphasis of today. So a little bit about our company. So Management Cues is unique. We specialize in training, but creating an immersive experience. And we focus on what managers are experiencing, not just imparting knowledge, but really feeling and getting a gauge for their skills gaps, their challenges, and helping them have a platform where they can be seen and heard, and where their experiences can kind of come to life and lend to the learning. So unique approach to training. We measure and track everything. So that's unique as well. Our training experience literally tracks performance as we conduct workshops in the live environment. So anyway, if you're curious, you can learn more about us on our website, and I'll share a little bit more at the end. But here we go. So today, what we're going to cover is we're going to talk a little bit about the pregame, right? Before you actually launch your team building activity, what does pre-planning look like and what should it consist of? We're going to talk about objectives of team building, core principles that we should think about as we're designing an activity, how to assess the needs of the team, and also recognizing what doesn't work anymore. There's so much that has changed in terms of the workforce, not just globalization, the introduction of different generations, diversity, all of these things that as managers come at us all at once when we're working with our teams. Whether we recognize it or not, it lends either to a positive or a negative outcome. And so our awareness is definitely a key component of that. And then we'll talk about some management tools and how to create some standardization around effective team building. Okay. And then we'll close it out. So we'll keep it short and sweet for this round. But like I said, feel free to chime in chat, use your reactions, and unmute if there's something that you want to share. Okay. Okay. Here we go. So I always start with fundamentals when it comes to team building. So team building in the workforce, it involves daily interactions, activities, exercises, and somewhat formal events if you want to elevate or bring a more sophisticated approach to fostering teamwork. the goal of team building is specific outcomes, right? So the goal of team building is to transform a group of individuals into a cooperative and cohesive team. So it's not just hanging out, it's really having more defined outcomes and getting to know your team and what it is that they need to level into. Great teams are built through intention, strategy, and thoughtful design. They don't happen by chance. So, a lot of what I learned throughout my career was through very hard, difficult mistakes that I had to endure. And so, what I learned was there was more to team building than I thought originally, especially at the beginning of my career. The other thing that stood out to me was I was never formally trained on how to create effective team building activities. And so let me know in chat because I'm curious, have you ever been trained on how to create or design effective team building activities? And I'll keep an eye out for that in chat, but I definitely didn't get that kind of training. Okay, yeah, I didn't. And so that's kind of what sparked my fire. And so first, it begins with the fundamental of knowing the difference of what it means when we come together and the different ways in which we come together. And, we spend over 8 hours with people at work. They become like family, even though they are not. And I like to make that distinction, particularly with newer managers, because it gets confusing for them. And it was confusing for me too. So team building activities have purpose, right? The team building activities are meant to enhance teamwork, collaborate, problem solve, and enhance communication among team members. Gatherings have a purpose too. They have a place. So the purpose of gatherings is to create a relaxed environment for employees to connect and engage, but informally. That's the purpose. It's meant to be casual. When we're talking about company parties or more formal events, the purpose is to celebrate an occasion, a milestone, or an achievement in a fun and enjoyable way. So this seems really simple, but I promise you, because I've experienced it and I've seen it with my managers, we confuse them all the time. Okay, let's keep going here as we continue to get ready to design. So pre-planning for team building. So if you're not going into a pre-game mode, there's an aspect of design that you're missing, because this part of it is reflection. It's understanding your team. So the pre-planning for team building and designing an activity is assessing the team's current disposition before designing team building activities. And, feel free to challenge me a little bit, but I did not do pre-planning for team building and designing activities till about 10 years ago, right? So it took me a while to get to the point where I realized I needed to understand my team better instead of just putting activities out there that I thought would be fun or that I thought would be good, right? Identify the team's development stage. Are they in a forming, storming, norming, performing, or adjourning stage? And if you're not familiar with these stages, I encourage you guys to Google them. We do offer formal training on those stages, but knowing what stage your team is in helps you align your activity for a clearly aligned outcome. If you introduce an activity for a team that is storming, you can create more chaos, right? You can create more conflict. You can bring up feelings of disconnect, disengagement, or just isolation. So this can actually trigger people, even if your intention is to build, right? To do team building. The timing of team building activities impact the quality of the outcome. So without understanding the team's disposition, the reality is that from the beginning, your team activity may fail. So when you're assessing your team's needs, what does that mean? What does that look like? It means taking these steps before you launch your activity. It means evaluating team dynamics, which is the phases and stages of development that I've just gone over. It's identifying and determining key areas of growth. What are their gaps, right? So it really requires you knowing your team and what it is that they actually need. It's collecting team feedback, right? It's designing the activity, but also getting feedback along the way as to what the team feels they need, right? And it not just relying solely on your observation. It's aligning with organizational goals. This means, what does the company need from this team, right? And then syncing those parameters into the design. So let's get into the building blocks of getting started and designing team building activities. So first, and one of the most important parts, is understanding the objective. What is the objective of us coming together in this activity to build, right? It's answering that question. And I think that for me, what has helped me is getting it to be one or two things, not 5 different things that we're trying to build into an activity. The simpler you can make it in terms of objective, the better the activity is going to be. So objectives can look like this. It could be to improve communication. It could be to develop trust. It could be to encourage collaboration or maintain and increase motivation. It could be to encourage creativity and innovation. It could be to build leadership skills. The reason why I focus on just 1 or 2 things is because it's difficult to track and measure, which we will talk about, if your goal is to, in one activity, cover 10 things, right? It's also largely ineffective. Because what ends up happening is team members get confused and then they don't understand why they're there or what their takeaway should be. So these small things make a huge difference in design. If I'm working with new managers, my preference is for them to focus on one thing. What one thing is the objective of this activity you're designing? And it helps them really understand and explore things in depth, which, by the way, also allows their team to retain the takeaway more easily. So core principles of effective team building. So these are some principles in terms of gauging, are you effectively team building? Things to look out for, right? So clear goals and purpose. If your activity isn't clearly laid out and the purpose isn't clear, the design is not done well. Right. And so go back, rework the design if you yourself cannot answer this question. Is there psychological safety in this activity? Or is it creating unnecessary, not unnecessary, but maybe too much of an aggressive competition? Or is it isolating someone in the group? Those types of things are things you need to consider. And it takes you knowing your group to do that. Is effective communication taking place? Are you announcing it? Are you staging it? Are the instructions or the rules clear? Is there trust and mutual respect? And that can be gauged by understanding what phase of development the team is in, right? They may not be ready to trust or may not have mutual respect. When a team is storming, there's a lot going on. And so maybe what you need to focus on is creating something that simply focuses on building trust, right? Collaboration over competition. Competition, I feel, can work well in activities once the team is gelling. So that's another example of, you have to know when to push and pull. I always use that expression in training. Sometimes we're pushing when we should be pulling and vice versa. And so as leaders, we have to recognize what people are going through. Inclusivity and diversity. Adaptability and problem solving, accountability and ownership, and measurable impact and continuous improvement. So one of the key components of how Management Cues does things is we're keen on measuring every aspect of things that we do. And it really helps us know where to improve, but also what people are going through. And so a core principle of your design should be, how are we going to measure if this worked, right? And we're going to talk about that in a minute. So when designing a team building activity, the activity design and selection, right? Considering the things we've just discussed, you want to choose activities that align with goals. And again, keep it simple: problem solving, communication, trust building. You want to ensure that everybody is going to feel like they're a part of it. And you can balance purpose with fun. Just because there's design and an intended outcome doesn't mean it has to be boring or stoic or highly sophisticated. It could be super simple, and you could still check off all of these things we've talked about. So you want to engage teams while maintaining a professional focus. You have to remember a team building activity is not a gathering. It's not a party, right? It's not, let's go have a drink. That's not a team building activity. And you want to plan the logistics. The logistics have to make sense. And that includes timing, right? Where it takes place, when it takes place, how it takes place in terms of duration. Those things impact the effectiveness of a team building activity. A team building activity that's too short may not be retained, right? May not mean anything. A team activity that goes too long might completely burn somebody out, and hence they lose the point of what's happening. So those things are all critical. Execution and facilitation. You want to set expectations. People need to know what's expected of them. Yes, even in a team building activity, how you relay how they're going to participate, that's how they know how to step into it, right? So sometimes we jump into team building activities and the team members have no idea what's expected of them, right? And so it's our fail when that happens. You want to encourage participation. One thing that I do that I've seen works really well, and I feel is more immersive and incredibly inclusive in a very holistic and natural way, is I think of how I'm going to get everybody to participate without having to call on one person individually or having to focus on just one person in the audience so that they don't feel like it's all on them, right? So those are things in design that we need to think about. It's inclusivity in action versus forced inclusivity, where we're saying, let's be inclusive, and then everybody feels awkward about it. Which is what tends to happen in real scenarios, right? We like to talk a lot as professionals and as leaders, but it's in the design that we find effectiveness. So adapt as needed, observe them. Don't judge them, observe them. There's a difference, right? Don't make up your mind, live the moment. That has worked exceptionally well in our workshops, where we just get curious about what people are experiencing. And I can tell you the results have been phenomenal. Post-activity follow-up. So follow through is an area that I focus on with managers because I feel like there's a huge lapse there, just in operations from my operations experience. And I'm seeing it in training when I'm working with managers as well. So I think I'm onto something. I think that people don't know how to follow through and follow up, and they lose everything that they've labored because they don't know what it looks like. So gather feedback. Reinforce key takeaways. Yes, repetition is how we retain. It's proven and backed by neuroscience. So figure out creative ways to repeat something, whether it's a follow-up email, whether it's key points they get to take away in a handout, whatever it is. Find a way to have them review it one more time as they have finished the activity. Implement action items. Give them creative ways to apply what the point of the activity was in their life setting. And if it's not applicable, then again, you failed at design, because a team building activity should link back to workplace benefit. And lastly, measure impact. So this nifty checklist, which if I could save any checklist from this deck, it would be this one. And you're going to get it. I'm going to email it to you along with access to the recording. So feel free to share it. But this is the beef. This is how you evaluate if your team activity is working. So engagement and participation, it should look like this. High participation rate and enthusiasm. That means people laughing, they're excited, they're saying things like, I'm going to try this to see if it works. They're challenging. That's okay. That's engagement too. Have them challenge, right? Balanced involvement. No one is left out or dominating. That means you heard from everybody throughout the activity in some way. Not everybody has to share in the same way, but they said something. They reacted in some way. Active communication and collaboration during the activity. Did they communicate with each other? Did they collaborate with each other? Because that is the emphasis of a team building activity. not being individual contributors. If they were individual contributors, the entire team building activity, your design failed, right? Effectiveness and impact. Team members report improved understanding of roles and strengths. There's increased trust, respect, and camaraderie among participants. There's clear demonstration of problem solving and teamwork skills. The participants feel comfortable providing constructive feedback, meaning they will tell you how to improve that activity, or they will tell you what they liked and what they didn't like. And if they're not telling you, there's an opportunity there. There's something in the follow-up or follow-through that you can do better. Long-term impact, which is my most favorite because of the operations lens, right? I look for how can I make this sustainable? Okay, noticeable improvement in team communication and collaboration. And this will take a little bit of time and practice, but as you get better at designing your team building activities, long-term impact should be your focus. Reduction in conflicts or misunderstandings. Is it actually helping? And if not, think about why not. What is not happening in your team building activities that's not contributing to that resolution? Increase morale and engagement in daily work. Application of skills learned in real work situations. And that could require some reinforcement on your part of, do you remember the activity that we did last month? How can we apply what we've learned? Or what's working from what we did in the activity in the real world, or what isn't? It's both is beneficial. The ROI and business relevance. So here's where I sync up with my clients is on the ROI, because we want to know what we're investing in. And we have to know how it's relevant to our end goal. Measurable improvement or in productivity or efficiency. At the end of the day, if they're not more productive or more efficient, we need to change our approach, because that is the ultimate business goal. That is your return on investment. Positive feedback from leadership on team dynamics. That is also reflective of ROI. Okay. Alignment with company culture and long-term team development goals. And again, if your company is not in a place where you know what these are, then you need to define these so that everything else experiences that trickle-down effect of alignment. Okay, so ineffective team building. So for me, it's really important to see the positive side and what it looks like in full-blown effectiveness, and what it looks like when it's not ineffective, so that I know at least at the very minimum to avoid that area. At the very minimum, you'll be better for that. Okay, so here's what ineffective team building looks like. So if this is happening, your team building activity is ineffective. Okay, and it has to be reworked, redesigned. Forcing uncomfortable situations. If you could see that your team is uncomfortable, something needs to be addressed, something needs to be redefined, or you have to start slower with something simpler, right? Having low visibility. There's no awareness around who the team is, what they're experiencing, or you're not aware of the team's disposition. Poor communication. How the team building activity was going to play out. Nobody knows what's happening. And then you can tell so easily, because I always go into new environments when people say, what are we supposed to do? Why are we here today? That's poor communication, right? What am I supposed to be contributing? Poor communication. Designing an activity that only includes one team member. And I know that seems funny, but sometimes we tend to focus on one person in a group. And we actually are tailoring something around that person. And it could be because they're the problem person, or it could be because they're the overachiever. That is a mistake. Okay. And we do this subconsciously sometimes. So just be aware that that contributes to ineffective team building. Lacking clear articulated goals. We're team building, but nobody knows to what end. We say we're team building, so the team goes into a place or a room or a venue, and they call it team building. All the while, it's misdefined and there's no clear goal, right? And so you want to make sure you're not miseducating people on what we're actually doing here. Leading with ego. The team building activity is not about you. So if it fails, or if it succeeds, it's not about you. It's about getting to know the team and where they're at. So just make sure to put your ego in check. If a team building activity isn't effective, or even if it is effective, just check your ego, because team building activities are really not about the leader. Lacking vulnerability. it can get vulnerable. A very well-designed team building activity can bring things to light. Be prepared for it. Don't be shocked. Don't shut it down. I've had people in team building activities start crying because they've just come upon some self-awareness that the activity just brought it to light for them in that moment. Use that moment to help other people. Lean into empathy. Okay? Like don't get shocked. Don't shut it down. Don't move on. Acknowledge the humanity of what's happening in a team building activity. That's what you're there for, right? Fostering unhealthy competition. A team may not be ready to compete because of the development phase that they're in. Again, a competition team building activity for a team that's storming is a mistake. You're lighting that fire and you're part of the problem, right? Communicating ineffectively, we touched on a little bit. Communicating insufficiently. Make sure you give the right degree of information so you get the right result, right? So frame it, stage it, get them excited about it. Tell them what it is that we're trying to achieve. Confusing teamwork with socializing, that goes back to understanding the different types of us coming together. Judging. When we judge, it shows and people feel it. And it seems like something that we should all not be doing, but we do it so often, right? All of us. And it takes a high degree of awareness for us to check that, especially when people are in a state of vulnerability, right? So just make sure you're checking yourself there. Failing to include or excusing team members. If this is a team building activity, everybody is going to be there. And yes, it is a requirement. It's not optional. You're not optionally part of this team. So you have to, step into that. If you're going to be purposeful and intentional, time it correctly. That's why the logistics are important, because you can't be part of a team and decide to only be a part of a team when it works for you. That's not what a team is, right? And that applies to the activities that we do. Doing team building activities on the weekends or holidays. Respect work-life balance. Show them what that looks like if you're going to be a leader. And note that team building activity is not about fun. This is not their personal fun time. This is them building on something that's lending to the business. So let's be very, very thoughtful and respectful about that, because we confuse what things are from the moment that we design them. Not being fully present or distracted. If you're not in a place where you can effectively lead and keep them engaged to the team building activity, have somebody else do it. Just know you're either part of it, and it's okay. It could be an opportunity for somebody who's a great facilitator, who has great leadership skill, and it could be a platform for them to grow. And as a leader, we're not all meant to be perfect at everything, and that's okay. As a manager, as a leader, you get to decide whether you are stepping into the platform or you give somebody else an opportunity to do so. Okay, so here are some consequences. So when we don't do this right, it doesn't just create a neutral outcome. There's a negative impact. And so we either are going to learn how to do this right, and we're going to create an impact, or we're going to avoid it and we're just going to go through the motions, and we're actually going to detract from things. We're actually going to create a negative, right? So when we don't handle team building activities right, we actually stir up low morale and engagement. Employees feel disconnected, undervalued, and unmotivated. And sometimes it's because of the absence of design. Poor communication. Team members will struggle with misunderstandings, lack of clarity, and ineffective collaboration. There's increased conflict. Like I mentioned, the wrong activity can actually trigger people, and you can create more problems. Decreased productivity. The lack of cohesion and teamwork slows down progress and efficiency, right? So it is a time waster. You have impacted productivity negatively if you haven't designed a team building activity correctly. It does become that. And the challenge with that is that, guess what? To executive leaders who are looking at where the dollars go, when they don't see a return on investment and they see a negative productivity or a lack of improvement, to them, it was a waste of money. And technically, realistically, it was, right? As an executive leader, I can tell you that for me, that's part of the dilemma is I know what an effective team building activity looks like. And it is an asset. It's an asset when it's designed well, but when it's not, it is a cost. And so it's understanding those things and the relevancy. High turnover rates, right? Employees will also feel like it's a waste of time when things aren't designed properly. And so for them, it could be they don't even care. They just do this as a matter of habit, or this is just the way they've always done it. And those kinds of expressions are telling you that the team member is disengaging because there's no direction, right? Silos and lack of collaboration, poorly designed team building activities heighten those silos, right? Especially if you're not directing through them properly. And after that, team members become resistant to change. They start not appreciating change because they don't see the point of what things, the point of how things are playing out, right? And so they make up their own mind about it. And then poor problem solving and weak leadership development. It's hard to find leaders and who has capacity or capability in these moments when we don't have clarity around what we are doing. And ultimately, that creates negativity in the workplace and sometimes even toxicity, right? And it's because of our lack of attention to design. So here's an example of ineffective team building activities that are very common and have been very common over the past 20 years. I'm going to explain to you guys why they're ineffective in case you're doing these. The trust fall, the team juice cleansing, paintball, go-karting, obstacle courses, a retreat when the team is dysfunctional, going out to eat with no defined purpose or intended outcome, using time together to gossip. Okay. And I know that that's not formal, but that happens. It happens all the time. We do it very casually, and it feels harmless, but it's because of a lack of awareness, right? So the trust fall is now overused and outdated, and it often fails to build real trust, right? So it's one of these things where we're going through mnemonics. We're just talking about it, but nothing's actually happening. It could create discomfort or safety concerns rather than bonding. It doesn't address deeper team issues like communication and collaboration. The team juice cleansing, I can tell you, I've seen this, especially with the younger generations. They're doing this and they're thinking it's team bonding, and it's because nobody else is breaking out the design to them. So they're just doing the best that they can to try to bring people together. So just be aware. It excludes individuals with dietary restrictions or preferences. So you're actually creating silos. Lacks relevance to teamwork or workplace collaboration. There's no actual workplace collaboration or application there. It can feel forced or gimmicky rather than engaging. So people feel pressured, right? Feel pressured to be part of it just because they want to feel that teamwork, but nobody has put any thought into design. The paintball, go-kart racing, and firewalking, competitive rather than collaborative, which can create division. Some team members may feel uncomfortable and left out. It lacks direct application to workplace dynamics, right? So some of these things could work for certain things, but it doesn't apply to the general audience in most cases. The obstacle course can be physically demanding, excluding some team members. Keep in mind, we now have more generations in the workforce than we've ever had. So design has never been more relevant. Design has never been more important than it is today. Often focuses on physical endurance over actual teamwork skills. Without proper debriefing, it doesn't translate into workplace improvement. So again, you can use something like this. It has to be very well designed and thought out. And the goal has to be clear. What is your goal with that? A retreat when the team is dysfunctional. I've seen this happen, I think, a handful of times where executive leadership is honestly panicking and desperate. And they're like, let's do a retreat, because who doesn't love to travel, right? Who doesn't love to get away? People are more excited about getting away than they are about being together in a room. So be realistic about that if the team is dysfunctional, right? It avoids addressing deeper workplace conflicts. Dysfunctional teams need structured problem solving, not just an escape. You know, it's like that saying, if you need to have a vacation to escape from your life, maybe you should focus a little bit more on your life so that you don't feel like you need to escape from it so often. Okay, let's be real. That's where change happens, right? It can create frustration if real issues aren't acknowledged. We can't live in this bubble of avoidance. We have to problem solve. Going out to eat with no defined purpose or outcome. This is the thing we do in the most lackadaisical way, and we do it the most often, weekly, monthly, right? Socializing alone doesn't strengthen work relationships. It lacks structured activities that encourage collaboration. It can reinforce existing cliques rather than team unity. So think about how often this happens and think about what you're actually reinforcing. Because if you're the decision maker and you're part of that, that is what you're having being staged as something that's team building. And it's not team building at all, not in the least. Using time together to gossip. It erodes trust and creates a toxic work culture, distracts from meaningful relationship building, reinforces workplace divisions instead of fostering teamwork. And gossip exists in a lot of places. And so what we reinforce is what makes it a problem or not, right? People are going to gossip. Can you stop everybody? No, you can't. But what you are reinforcing with what you do is what makes the difference. So we have this nifty management tool that we created at Management Cues, and you guys are going to get it for participating in today's webinar. It's a team building checklist. I use this for newer managers to structure their thinking, to check the boxes so that they make sure that they're not participating in things that don't have an intended objective. Okay, so you'll get to see it and it'll be updated. Standardize your and your team members' approach to team building activities for reliable outcome. You have the power to create consistency around how you think about team building activities and how your team interprets it. And using tools like this one or one you design on your own, could be the way to do it. You're teaching people how to do things effectively versus just randomly creating it on their own and creating additional inconsistencies in your environment. These commonly implemented workplace initiatives often lack protocols. Think about this question, and I'd love for you to respond in chat. How many of you have a guide for team building activities that you provide your new managers? And just say yes or no, because that is everything. You're literally setting them up to make it up as they go along. And it's such an important culture builder, and it's going to happen. They're going to run into it, and they're going to spend money that's not going to be aligned with the return on investment. And the executive leader is going to say, we're not going to do that anymore. That's what's going to happen, because that is how executive leaders think. Okay, key takeaways, okay? Team building must be intentional. Activities should have a clear purpose tied to team goals rather than just fun or random events. Effective teams require trust and communication. Strong teams thrive on open communication, mutual respect, and psychological safety. That is not easy to build. It's not built in a day, but team activities help you get there. Okay? One size does not fit all. Different teams have different needs. Tailor activities based on team dynamics, challenges, and goals. Get to know your team in different ways. Sustained effort is key. Team building is not a one-time event, but an ongoing process that requires reinforcement in daily work culture. The reinforcement is what gets you your ROI, right? So as managers and leaders, we have to think, okay, how is this going to translate to an ROI? If you're able to think that way, you will be able to negotiate and advocate with executive leaders in a much more effective way. I guarantee it. I've been a manager from entry level, mid-level, director level, executive level. I've done it all. And this is the kind of stuff that got me there. Measure success and apply lessons. The impact of team building efforts should be tracked through engagement, collaboration, and real workplace improvements. You have to be able to speak to what you accomplished as a manager and as a leader. If you don't, you didn't do well with the design and it wasn't clear enough to you to begin with. Okay? Okay. Any questions or comments before we close it out? You guys have been great. Thank you for participating in chat. Julia? Yeah, I see ya.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I wanted to know if you could give some examples or like evidence of judging versus observing.
Yeah, I think observing is you're watching with the intent to notice people's facial expressions. You're listening actively to what they're saying and how they're saying it. Judging to me is you're making your mind up in that moment about what is happening. And we form that habit because we have a habit oftentimes of listening to respond, not listening to understand. So when you're observing, it's not about you answering. It's not about you making a decision. When you're observing, you're simply taking it in. You're simply, and for me, I know when I'm doing it because, of course, I'm human like everybody else. I know when I'm observing, when I'm paying attention to people's expressions, even remote, even like this. I'm looking at you guys nodding, and I'm looking at, are you smiling? If you're doing the shaking my head, right? Oh no, then I'm like, okay, that was something that they've probably experienced, right? It's that versus, oh, they said no. Everybody said no. These managers don't know anything. That's judging, right? And that's not
Right.
how I feel about it. But it took a long time for me to discipline and make that distinction, because I wanted to be right, especially as a young professional. I was so eager to be right. I was so eager to win. I was so all this eagerness. But the reality is that winning doesn't necessarily mean impact. Being right doesn't necessarily mean everybody's going to get it. And as a manager, everybody needs to get it. It's not about you getting it, it's about everybody else getting it. And so that's how I started to make those distinctions and build those cues around those two things.
Love it. One more.
Yeah.
Um, would an escape room, like I guess, could an escape room kind of activity be planned ahead of time enough to be a effective team building activity?
Here's what I think. I think most activities can be effective if they're very well thought out, and if you can clearly. That's why I say, like, if the escape room is the activity and the goal is communication, and you
Hmm.
build criteria around what that communication looks like, then you're teaching people how to communicate, for example, and then the measure of that would be how they communicate it. So, yes, I feel like you can. I think that an escape room is more difficult to track in terms of return on investment and performance.
Hmm.
Um, I think you would have to spend a lot of time on the criteria of what you want them to act like throughout that activity and what effective participation looks like. Um, but I think that having these components in mind, most activities can be productive as long as they're clearly aligned. It just depends how much time do you have, right? Because that's the other constraint. As
Hmm.
managers, we don't have a lot of time. And sometimes what ends up happening is you think, oh, I have to design something. I don't have time to design it. And so then you just don't do it. When these things could be very simple and still effective, it could be a 1 hour team building activity that's only about trust or only about communication or only about collaboration. And it's effective because it was well designed, not because you had more hours in a day.
There. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, great questions. Thank you. Anybody else before I close us out? Okay, here we go. We're closing it out. Okay, so thank you for joining me. I enjoy doing these, and I hope that you have at least a few key insights that you can take away of how to see team buildings activities in a different light. We offer training and support and resources. Part of our mission is making things accessible, easy, practical for managers. Again, focusing on the manager's experience. So if you're curious about what we do and how we do it, feel free to visit us at www.managementcues.org. Our hero product, our main primary management tool that we've designed is our Management Cues Planner. And it focuses on management and leadership functions and breaks them out on a day-to-day type of guide. Super affordable, super accessible. It's $24 and it's now available on Amazon Kindle for anybody who has a Kindle and likes to learn that way. Incredible tool. I offer free management consultations. If you're curious about what we do, book a call, no obligation. Don't feel any sort of burden. Even if you're just curious, give me a call. I'd love to chat with you. And we provide live events like these and others in creating immersive experiences for managers. So with that said, thank you so much for joining. I hope you learned something, and please stay in touch. You guys take care.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye, you guys. Thank you for joining.